Next, I'm going to be measuring both steering racks, and which I already did. Kind of explain on why I'm going to be doing what I'm doing. So next is going to be the two cutting parts, right? So one, I'm going to have to be cutting the subframe. And the reason why is because there's two openings of the head of the subframe to fit the steering rack, right? So you have one to put this, to put the steering head to go through the hole through the subframe, and that's where the the steering linkage connects to the steering column through the firewall. Then you have the second hole, which will have the feeds. So the smaller hose is going to be the feed, and then the bigger one is the return. So those are the two heads. What we're going to be doing is that we need to cut the hole for the head a little bit wider towards the outside, so towards the wheel. And the reason why is because this is a little bit, the head is a little bit bigger, has a little bit more wires, and it is a little bit wider, so you have to line up the holes to the subframe. So that's the one going to be cut. So again, I'm going to cut the opening for the steering head on the subframe. That's one cut. Then the second cut is going to be on the outer and inner tie rods. And the reason why is that we cannot reuse the inner tie rods for the RS or the WRX or the RS is that those thread is a M16, whereas the 2015 is a M20. So you could do this two ways. You could either buy M16 to M20 thread insert adapters, which I couldn't find. So what I did with another option was that after researching is that I'm going to be using the correct M20 inner tie rods that connects to the steering rack for the 2015 STI, and going to be using my whiteline outer tie rods. But what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to actually cut this shorter, because since they're so long, no matter, even if you go all the way to the end, it'll still be a little bit longer than the 2002 WRX GD rack which I had in my car. The difference is about 3.5 inches, but it's not as simple as just cutting it to length, because you remember you do need enough playroom, like you can see here on the inner tie rod where how much thread is left, and there's thread inside the inner tie rods to go all the way in or all the way out. But of course, you'll never be all the way in, you'll be somewhere in the middle, because that's how you adjust your toe. So obviously so the trick is going to be keeping the same length as the GD tie rod, because I know that's how it was set up already when I got it aligned. My toe was perfect what I wanted. But now what we're going to be doing is we're going to have to make sure that these inner and outer tie rods are going to be cut and have enough play to be able to get adjustment for the toe I want, as well as have the same length. So if that makes sense. Essentially what I'm going to have to be doing is going to have to be cutting the inner tie rod and cutting the outer tie rod, just so it has more, they're a little bit shorter. So when they become a little bit shorter, you'll have the same length overall, but you'll still have enough thread to have the adjustment for the toe. All right, so for an example, I wanted to show here, these are the old ones that I came with the rack that I already got new inner and outer tie rods. So I use this as a practice round to cut. So you can see this is screwed down all the way. So this inner tie rod is maxed out this outer tie rod. So you can see that I cut a 1/2 inch off this tie rod. So this is all the way down. See how much thread there's still? And that's why it's still longer. I cut a 1/2 inch off this inner tie rod without cutting. I drew a line here where I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch as well. So imagine if I cut that so then it cuts it shorter, and it also has more play. So those are the two things of cutting that I really, hopefully I did an okay job of explaining that. So that's the reason why you have to cut the inner and outer tie rods, because of the length, and you have to make sure that you have enough room to adjust the toe, and as well as cutting the head of the subframe opening for the steering rack head. So we're going to go ahead and actually start cutting that steering rack, cutting the subframe, and we're going to notch the subframe to open the steering head, and I want to make sure that the holes line up. Once we have the rack and the holes lined up, then we're going to go ahead and start measuring out the tie rods, cut those, and that will be it. Of course, we'll have to do the power steering lines, but power steering lines is easy. The rack is the main part. So here we go. We're going to start the cutting. This is going to be the hardest part of the installation, so hopefully it goes well. Here is the steering rack head hole for the subframe, and right above it is going to be the shifter linkage to the firewall to the steering column. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is going to be cutting just a little bit right here to open up this a little bit more. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to test fit it. Next thing you'll see on the camera is a little line that I'm going to draw, and I'm just going to cut against that line. All right, let's go ahead and start that. Alright, so now you can see I made the cut for to opening up the subframe. That's going to be the cut. It's going to be cutting out maybe like a ½ an inch, opening it up a little bit more. Go ahead and cut it with a rotary tool and a metal cutting disc. Let's go ahead and get started on that. Alright, so I'm almost done cutting. This is probably going to be my last cut. I just always remember, don't cut too much. I do measurements, cut a little bit under that measurement always, test fit the steering rack, and see, and just keep inching, not even inching, like keeping doing just millimeters by millimeters, because you want to cut as least as possible, of course. So I'm going to make my last cut, if you can see that. So pretty much, if you want to do it, I just started straight from this line, went down. You'll see there's a little boot, like a little, starts to come out. So the curve right here, so cut right under that curve, and then you're gonna see where all three curves, it'll see kind of like a trifecta right in this area. You're gonna be like about ½ an inch below that, come down, and then it meets up with this end. Like that. So this is probably gonna be my last cut, and I was lining up the holes to hit to this rack, and it's looking real good. Subframe cutting is done, so you can see the hole here. I just sprayed it really quickly with some spray paint, because remember, if it's raw metal, it's gonna rust, so make sure to spray it after you cut it. So just a light spray, nothing crazy, literally I just cleaned it with some acetone and then just sprayed it twice just to make sure everything's covered, and it's good to go. So cut out quite a bit. It's probably about ½ an inch. I'll put a side by side, see if you can see the difference. Alright, so what I'm going to show here is that, so this is the 2015 rack. So on this side, you're going to have to buy, if I want to do whiteline, so I kind of sucks, but you have to buy one side of whiteline bushings for this side, and then one side of whiteline bushings for the GD, and then one whiteline signs for the 2015 and up. So you kind of have to buy both full kits, but then you only use half of each one. But they're not that expensive, so it's really not that bad. So I already removed one. The kit comes with a bushing removal tool, which is awesome. Shout out to Whiteline. So we're gonna go ahead and I'll just show you how to remove these bushings. So now that we got the subframe cut and it's fitting perfectly, so now we're going to be going ahead and installing the rack itself. I just want to make sure everything fits perfectly. Then we're going to start with the inner tie rods. But let's go ahead and get started with this. So you're going to need 2 sets of white line bushings. You're going to have, I forgot which one is which, but one is going to be the 2015 plus STI. The other one is going to be the 02 to 07 STI white line steering rack bushings. They're both pretty cheap. You could get them for both about $40 each. It does suck because you get to use the 2015 one side and then the GD on the other side. So you use 50% of each kit. But if you want the white line bushings, this is the way you're gonna have to do it. You can look up any other company that's cheaper and maybe buy those two. All right, so moving forward, you're gonna be using the D-shaped GD passenger side bushing with the GD bracket. Okay, so that's going to be the passenger side. On the 2015 STI, it's completely different mounting procedures on the driver side. So what we're going to have to be doing here is that you see I installed the white line bushings that just put in the 2 halves and then just slip in the spacer. All right, so What we're going to be doing is that we only need 2 of these bolts, and one's going to be a 50 millimeter. And I'm going to put these bolts, of course, in the description. I'll put all the parts in the description and all the links to them. Right. So you're going to have 2 of them. I believe they're M10s. So 2 M10 by 1.25 thread pitch, 150 millimeter, 160 millimeter. Right. You're going to need 2 M10 fender washers and 2 M10 locking washers. And I'm going to give you an example of how we're going to install this. And you're also going to need spacers. Right? And the reason why you need a spacer is because, so this side goes up, right? This side goes up through this part's going up through the subframe. So the bolts will be coming from under here. So let's turn it a little bit. So this, you can see that it's offset, right? Let me just show it from up here. So they're offset. You can tell the left one is higher than the right one right now. So therefore, when you line it up, this higher side, it will be used for the shorter one. How we're gonna do it is that you're gonna go doing lock washer, then fender washer, and going through up there, and then this is gonna go straight into the subframe. The other side's gonna need a spacer. So since that side's gonna be lower, it's gonna be the same thing. You go lock washer, fender washer. This is going to go through, and to create that, and to fix that gap we're going to have, since that side's lower, we're going to have a spacer on the top here, and then this is going to screw into the subframe. Okay, so that's the order it's going to be. I'm going to do that to the car, and then we're going to go show you how it's going to look on the car. So the GD whiteline kit comes with 2 D-shaped bushings. One is going to be the 1095A and the 1099. So you want to use the thinner one. The thinner one is 1099 part number. And this is going to be the passenger side bushing you're going to use for this, all right? Just wanted to show, so this is the 2015 STI Inner tie rod, and this is the one on the right is my 2002 WRX Inner tie rod that I was running. You can see how much longer it is. Half an inch off each tie rod and the white line. It's gonna hurt to cut this, but you gotta do what you gotta do, right? It's gonna be next. Alexa, play. Alright, so I just cut 2 inner tie rods and 1 outer tie rod. So this is the one cut, half an inch off of this. And cut 1/2 inch off the white line outer tie rods. So this is what it's gonna look like when it's cut off in half. It's, of course, it's hollow, so just cut around the edges. It's pretty easy to cut. If you got a rotary tool and a metal cutting disc, specifically a metal cutting disc like that, so it says metal on it. 1/2 inch. So yeah, so pretty much it's gonna go 1/2 inch on all of them. I might honestly cut another 1/4 inch off the inner tie rods, just to get a little bit more play, because when I now with 1/2 inch cut off each of these, I can spin it all the way down. I can spin the outer tie rod all the way down, but remember you have to leave a space for a nut, for the locking nut. But I can spin it all the way down, and it's the same size as my WRX steering rack, which is what we're trying to get to, right? So go ahead and I'm gonna cut this one first. I'm gonna measure it, and then we'll go back, and then we'll start from there. Alright, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna add grease right now. So add grease to this joint right here. You're gonna add grease to this joint right here, and it should come with the packet of the inner tie rods. Then we're gonna slip on the steering rack boot, and then after we stick on the boot, we're gonna zip tie the ends and then add the outer tie rod, and then we're gonna go on to the power steering line from there.